He's dead serious that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. He's said that for 20 years. He's been consistent. That is clear. But he's also dead serious that if we can't figure this out at the negotiating table, then there are other options, to include my department, to ensure that Iran never has a nuclear bomb. We hope we never get there. We really do, Maria. But what we're doing with the Houthis and what we're doing in the region, we've shown a capability to go far, to go deep, and to go big. And again, we don't want to do that. But if we have to, we will, to prevent the nuclear bomb.
But he's dead serious, Judge. Didn't he tell you? He was dead serious. If you would have played that full clip, he said dead serious probably 6 times. You know, we're dead serious. We are dead serious. Okay, are we dead or are we serious? You know, which is it? Pete Hegseth is such an intellectual lightweight that he is the real danger, the foolishness of putting him in that position is he's only going to do what Donald Trump tells him to do. He's not one that's going to come and provide Trump with any kind of wisdom or advice or even a voice of caution to say, hey, boss, before we do this, let's think this through. Let's think through the fact that since March 15th, we've been bombing the dickens out of the Houthis, and they've shot down 4 of our Predator Jones in the last 2 weeks, and we haven't stopped them from being able to fire missiles into Israel. So after 4 weeks of intense military effort on our part, we can't stop the Houthis. There's no way in hell we're going to stop the Iranians. So let's take that off the table. Let's not even talk about it because it makes us look ridiculous. When Witkoff, the deal that he negotiated allegedly with the Iranians is basically, okay, we'll talk about stopping the enrichment of uranium. They didn't talk about dismantling the missile force, dismantling the military, ending all support for Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. That apparently is off the table because Iran says, we're not going to talk about that. We'll talk about our nuclear program. Witkoff comes back to D.C. Those neocon elements, the Waltzes, the Rubios, the Kellogg's, and David Friedman, the former U.S. ambassador to Israel, who's now supposedly going to become the U.S. representative at the UN. He's a crazed Zionist. And Mike Huckabee, look, they're going to punch back on Trump. Hey, you can't sell out Israel like this. You got to follow through. They sincerely believe that we've got the military force that we can defeat Iran, and that yet at the same time, they don't stop and look and say, we can't even handle the Houthis. But by God, we're going to handle a country that is really light years ahead of the Houthis in terms of military capability. Just insane. Do we want to put 2 million men in the field? Ooh. Do we want to use nuclear weapons without regards to the consequences for us? Yeah, we could do something like that. It could probably, destroy Iran, but in the process, probably destroy ourselves. Because the thing Washington, D.C. is not remembering, and, Pepe Escobar has talked about this. I've talked about it. Over the course of the last 3 weeks, let's say the last 4 weeks. So the first 2 weeks of March were caught up with Iran, Russia, and China doing a joint military exercise. After that exercise concluded, there was a meeting in Beijing between Iran, Russia, and China. Gee, talking about what? And then last week, a week ago today, Iran, Russia, and China were again in Moscow. They're coordinating what they're going to do with the United States. They're not looking at this as isolated episodes. The U.S. support for the war in Ukraine, the U.S. attack on China via the tariffs, the U.S. Threats to go to war with Iran. Those are all part and parcel as those countries look at it as a concerted U.S. effort to destroy them. And they've recognized, like our, my ancestors did in the American Revolution, we either hang together or we hang separately. They're hanging together.
Takeaways. U.S.-Iran negotiations focus narrowly on uranium enrichment, ignoring broader military issues, risking escalation. Neocons, Rubio, Kellogg, push for confrontation, ignoring U.S. struggles against the Houthis. Iran's alliances with Russia and China strengthen its position, viewing U.S. actions as a collective threat. Netanyahu's Libya solution for Iran is a fantasy, as Iran won't surrender sovereignty. Analysis. The discussion turns to Iran, where indirect U.S. negotiations, in the same hotel, address uranium enrichment but exclude Iran's missile forces or support for Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. Johnson is cynical, citing the assassination of Hezbollah's Nasrallah during peace talks as a precedent for potential deception, suggesting negotiations could be a ploy to target Iranian leaders. Netanyahu's Libya solution, regime change modeled on Gaddafi's fall, is dismissed as a Zionist fantasy. Johnson argues Iran, unlike Libya, won't yield sovereignty, especially to Israel, its mortal enemy. He critiques neocon advisors, Rubio, Kellogg, Friedman, Huckabee, for believing U.S. military power can defeat Iran, ignoring failures against the Houthis, who continue attacking despite U.S. bombing. This comparison highlights a disconnect between neocon ambitions and military realities. Johnson emphasizes Iran's strategic alliances, noting joint military exercises with Russia and China in March 2025 and subsequent meetings in Beijing and Moscow. These countries, he argues, see U.S. actions, Ukraine support, tariffs on China, threats against Iran, as a unified effort to destroy them. Quoting the American Revolution, Johnson suggests they hang together to counter U.S. pressure, enhancing Iran's resilience. The segment questions U.S. military capacity, with Johnson estimating a need for 2 million troops or nuclear weapons to defeat Iran, both impractical and self-destructive. The neocon push for war, he warns, underestimates Iran's capabilities and overestimates U.S. strength, risking catastrophic escalation. Summary. Negotiations with Iran are limited to nuclear issues, leaving tensions unresolved. Neocons advocate confrontation, ignoring U.S. weaknesses shown against the Houthis. Iran's ties with Russia and China bolster its stance, viewing U.S. moves as a collective threat. Netanyahu's regime change idea is deemed unrealistic. Conclusion. This segment effectively contrasts U.S. ambitions with strategic realities, using alliances and military failures to underscore risks. Johnson's cynicism about negotiations adds depth, though evidence of a targeted ploy is speculative. The analysis calls for caution, highlighting the dangers of neocon-driven escalation.